Hey guys, what's going on today? I hope everybody's doing well. Thanks for tuning in again. I've got a kind of a crazy looking situation going here on my workbench, which is in my case a folding table that I got from Walmart with one of those drip pans on the top of it. But hey, it works, so that's what I use. So anyway, what's going on is I got this cluster out of the Plymouth back here. The Plymouth is right behind us. There it is. So, there's the Plymouth. There's the Plymouth. There's the Plymouth. Got the cluster out of it, and I thought I would deal with its issues first because it's got at least one or two issues. So, I got it out, and I got it on the bench, and I'm just doing some testing. And by the way, I have made an order out for this car back here. I got a short list, well, not really a short list. I got a heater box seal kit. I got that will replace the wipers. I got some other stuff that was needed. Got the hose kit for the defroster. Boy, that wasn't cheap. And some odds and ends. So you'll be seeing that coming up soon. And I'm going to source a heater core locally because they've got them cheaper locally, if you can believe that, than you can get them off the internet. So I'm going to do it that way with that. And also, I'm going to get the brake lines locally too, because they're easily available. But anyway, on to this cluster. I've actually got two clusters here, and let's get a little bit closer and I'll try to get you in position that you can see something here that you need to see. Now we're looking at the back of these because these things are a little bit fragile and they're kind of hard to deal with, so I'm not going to turn them around right now, but suffice to say, you can hopefully believe me when I say that that's the 68 cluster that's in the car normally, and that's my spare cluster, one of them. Now I know one of you guys are going to say, you told me you didn't have a spare cluster. Well, I've got a good spare cluster. I've not got one that I want to sell because this one, if you see the front of it, it's real nice and I don't want to get rid of it. I hope you understand. But anyway, problem number one with this cluster was that the dash lights did not work from the switch. The guy had them hooked up. He had them hooked up the wrong way. He sort of backfed them because what he did was he took the harness that goes to the radio. It's got two wires in it, and that harness has got 12 volts that comes to the radio to operate the radio that comes on with the switch, the key, and then there's the other circuit has got 12 volts or whatever varying amount of voltage comes from the dimmer on the headlight on the instrument panel. You know, dims your instrument lights. That's the light for the radio. That's normally the way that works. Well, he was bright enough, no pun intended, he was bright enough that he figured out when something happened to kill the dash lights, he could take the harness wires and connect them to each other, and so the dash lights would come on whenever you turn the key on. Well, that's not the way they're supposed to work. I know that's a workaround, it's a hack, but I don't like hacks, so I want to get these working the right way. So I'm digging into the switch to see if the switch is indeed the problem. So one thing to note, I'm going to explain how these switches work. I had to have a little bit of education myself to learn how they work exactly, but as far as the dimmer circuit goes. But anyway, first thing to note on these Mopar headlight switches, at least in these A bodies, that's the side that where the plug goes in right there. And let me get you a real high class pointer. First thing to note is that this is your dimmer up here, your rheostat for your lights. Is if you turn the switch knob left to right, it's supposed to brighten or dim the dash lights. It's got a little coil of wire right in there. You've probably, any of y'all that are old enough, you know what that looks like. And it's a rheostat, so it means as you rotate this, it's got a little wiper on it, and it either increases or decreases the amount of voltage as it passes out of the switch into the instrument light circuit. So that's that, and those can cause problems when they get old and dirty and they just don't work anymore. You can try to clean them, but generally they don't take too well to cleaning. Now the other thing is that this switch has got several connections on it. There's a harness connector that just plugs into this totally. You know, these aren't separate, but They're separate, but they're one. Does that make sense? And you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different connections here, 6 different terminals. And the way this works is, let me get over so I can sit down. The way this works is fairly simple once you understand it. You have connection marked B1. You've got one, well, B1 in this case is actually down here. Then you've got one labeled B2. You've got one labeled R. You've got one labeled P. And you've got one D, H. That's 7. That ain't 6, is it? Let me start over. I'm telling you guys, trust me, I had to learn this myself. And evidently, I'm not got it completely yet, but we'll make it. Anyway, 7 terminals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, starting from the left corner down here, this one's marked B1, and you've got B2 up here. You've got P, you've got R, you've got H, you've got D, you've got I. Well, I'll confess, the first 30 minutes of me looking at this switch here, that didn't mean anything to me until I went and got on the computer and did some research and come to find out that's very explanatory of what's going on there, what these terminals all do. Okay, the two terminals marked B, which is B1 and B2. B1, B2 are battery. That means that they get battery voltage at all times, but they do different things, and they get different sources of voltage, if that makes sense in a way. B1 is the heavy one. This is the power to B1 comes from the battery directly. It comes through the fusible links, comes through the ammeter, and comes straight to the switch. And there's no fuse in there other than the fusible links, but this headlight switch has got an internal circuit breaker in it. That's why if you ever have an overheating headlight switch on some vehicle, you'll notice the headlights may flash on and off and on and off and keep on doing that. That's because that thing's internal. So if something shorts out, it'll kill the headlights with that circuit breaker. Okay, the only thing B1 does on these is it supplies the headlights, which is terminal H, which is right here for headlights. And so those run the headlights. That's the only two things those two terminals are responsible for on this headlight switch. Okay, then you have B2 up. Got a ghost in here again. You got B2, which runs everything else. Park lights, rear lights. Now, you've got one terminal here called P, which is park lights, which means that's a circuit that comes out and goes to the front of the car. It's got the side markers. It's got the lights in the grill. So when you pull it to the park position, those come on. And then you've got an R down here, which, guess what? That runs your rear lights. Runs everything, tail lights and tag lights, stuff like that. Okay, the other terminals, you got D, which stands for dome. And then you've got I, which is down here, which stands for instrument. So that tells you everything. That tells you what every one of these terminals does. B1 is the battery supply from the battery to the headlights. That's it. That's all it does. And then B2 is responsible for everything else. Now it gets its power from. It also goes through the ammeter, but it's not the heavy gauge because it doesn't have that much of a load on it. So the way this thing works is generally when you pull it to the second position, pull your switch out second position, it supplies power and it routes it internally. It supplies power from B2 because you don't have the headlights on. B2 to the rear lights, the marker lights, and it also supplies it to the instrument circuit. The instrument circuit on these actually is kind of convoluted. It comes out of this switch, right, and it goes to the fuse box. Comes through the fuse for the instrument panel lights, goes to the dash lights themselves. Now it's funny because the switch is right here, but it goes all the way around and comes back. That's just to protect the circuit. So if you screw up something and short it out, it's going to blow the fuse. So that's how it protects it. So where I had to learn how this thing worked is how to get a reading of whether this thing is doing what it's supposed to do when you supply voltage to the switch, and whether it's outputting voltage to the dash light circuit. This one appears to be dead, but I have not tested it yet. I've tested the other one over here. I'm about to show you how I did it. But I was looking, first thing I was looking at this headlight switch, and I noticed that this terminal for I, the instrument light terminal, is corroded. There's some rust and stuff here, and it's not looking too good. So actually that's a piece of brass or copper. I guess that's brass on this one. It kind of comes from back here directly from that wiper and goes over to right here. It should be a straight shot. I don't understand what's going on with the corrosion, because none of the other ones are doing that. I don't know if it's got some moisture on it or what it did, but that's not a good sign. So anyway, we're going to test this thing, but I thought I would show you what I did to test the other one. And I'll tell you right now, the other switch on my spare cluster, it ain't too healthy either. So let me reposition you. I don't have a whole lot of room here. Forgive me on this, but back out a little bit. Okay, so what I did here is I took my jumper pack and got it in the position back here. It's just a 12-volt jumper pack. It's a cheapo Harbor Freight thing I got, which works okay. And I took the negative cable and connected it to the frame of the dash back here at the back, that metal part right there, because that's your common ground for the headlight switch. And that thing ends up, when you bolt this thing back into the cart, it grounds on the dash frame. So you have to have that connected or it won't do anything. And then I got a piece of wire with the appropriate type of terminal on it, and I connected it to the B2 terminal on that headlight switch. I realize I forgot to tell you, when you pull the headlight switch all the way out, then that's the B1 circuit's completed, but I think you probably figured that out. I'm sorry. But anyway, went ahead and hooked that to the B2 terminal, which should supply my circuit that in turn supplies the dash lights. And then I had to have a way to measure, once I got voltage to that switch, I had to have a way to measure and see what I'm getting out of it, if I'm getting anything out of it. So first thing I did is I got my meter, which is right over here. It's another cheapo. Got my meter, and I got my probes and my little clamps onto the probe so I can clamp it. And I set that thing on 20 volts. It's off now, but set on 20 volts. I connected the negative side of the meter to the same dash frame I was just telling you about. That's the negative side of the circuit. And then I went over here and carefully connected the positive side, the positive lead of the meter, to the I output right there. See what I've done? So what I did was I got all that set up, and that's gonna, when I turn that jumper pack on, it's gonna energize the headlight switch circuit, at least supply power to it. So when I pull the switch out there to park or headlight, it should operate the dome light, the instrument panel circuit. That's a huge explanation for this, but this is not. It's not real simple to test these things. You can't really test them with a. You can't really test them with an ohm meter. I mean, I guess you could, but not. I couldn't. It wouldn't work. So let's go ahead, and first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the meter on. Just put it on 20 volts because we don't have over 20 volts, and I'll make sure you can see what's the meter's reading. All right, so get my chair out of the way. Boy, it's hot in here. So now I'm going to click on the jumper pack. And I'm going to pull the headlight switch just after. Imagine me doing this. It's hidden there, but I'm going to pull it out to the park position. Now I'm not getting anything right there, but if I start twirling this switch back and forth, I start getting blips out of it. See that? It's trying to work. It's trying to do something, but see, I got 2 volts out of it. It's dirty, dirty, and dirty. That's why it's not really wanting to work real well. I had it working pretty good while I got there, and see right there, I'm getting full power out of it, and it's that's not right anyway, because it's not even turned all the way to full brightness. So that switch has got issues. So basically, what I've done is you couldn't really see my hand here, but I've just taken the headlight knob and just worked it back and forth to see if I could get it to do something. So right now the switch is outputting power to the dash lights. So if we had this thing connected, the dash lights would work. Now, if I want to make this even more confusing than it already is, I could put a bulb out here and kind of demonstrate, but the meter will suffice. You just have to kind of bear with me. So that's my test setup. So I know my test setup's okay. So what I'm going to have to do now is I'm going to have to come over to this one. I'm probably going to change places with these things. And I'm going to come over to this one, the one that I'm really suspicious of, the old one out of the car, and turn everything back off first. And then I'm going to set it up and I'm going to test that one to see if that switch is any good. And it's looking to me like I can maybe try to doctor that one that you're looking at, maybe make it work better. I don't know. But we'll see if this one's any good. I bet I end up having to buy a switch. That's too bad too, because those are original Mopar switches and I like to use those, but when they start getting dirty and grubby and crapping out, that's about it. So, okay then, let me reset things up and we'll see if we get anything out of the other switch. Okay, I got the other one into position here. I think I got this thing. Oh no, I hooked it up the wrong way. Let's see. This is the 68 cluster. This is the one I'm really questionable about. 0 so far. Well, you get the blip out of it. It's like it's trying to do something when you start to turn it. You turn it and it's doing something, but like what I'm doing is when I start to turn it. Alrighty then. Happy about being there, was it? Anyway, when I'm starting to turn it, it starts to react, and then you let off the knob, it doesn't do anything. See, it won't keep on putting voltage out. I can make it start to, I'm going to keep turning it like that. As long as it's moving, it does something. Well, alright, that ain't gonna work. So, okay then, looks like short story of this one is we got one totally bad headlight switch and we got one that's no better than marginal. So I guess I'll have to see if I can get a decent quality replacement switch for it. I saw some on the internet that were Wells, so that's, at least they used to be fairly good. So I'm going to do one other thing too. I got the battery pack out here. I'm going to see if I can get a reaction out of this gas gauge. This one's not working. I think it's not working. Stayed down on E even though I had some gas in this. So I'm going to re-rig this cluster up. And I'll show you real quick, those of you who might be working on these, I've got some good comments and questions from you guys that I didn't know y'all were working on cars like this, but you are, so that's good, and I'm happy, and it's kind of, I like to help you guys, of course, more than anything. It's a little bit hard for me to answer, like when y'all got a lot of stuff going on with your cars. You know, I try to answer them in the comments, but hopefully I can kind of show you some stuff as we go along here that will help you. And one tip I'd like to give you is that if you ever wonder how on one of these Mopar clusters like this, how to get the headlight switch out, you pull it out. This is in all the way out. You might wonder how to get that thing out. You know, you got a little bit of this thing has got kind of a weird little retaining nut that screws into the switch there. It's got these little holes on the outside of it. You have to carefully take like a little screwdriver or something like that and start working those things around counterclockwise, and it unscrews. But meantime, you have to get this headlight switch out. So you may be wondering, how do you do that? It's real simple, and this is not the only kind of car that works like this. You come around the back of the headlight switch, and I hope you can see this. Look back here, there's a little knob. You pull it out to on, so the headlight switch is on. You depress this knob fully. You have to work this one, kind of didn't want to work too good. Out it comes. That's all it is. It's got like a little slot on the back of it, I guess it is. So that's how you get that out. And then again, to take the headlight switch out itself, which this one's got to come out, you're just going to take, like I said, take a little screwdriver and start working this thing around. You can see that. And yeah, start working that thing around, and it just unscrews. Wipers the same way if you need to do that over here. So okay, I'm going to now set this thing up to test the fuel gauge. And one thing to remember when you test fuel gauges or gauges, that you generally have to ground them fully to get them to react. So you have to do that quickly. It means when you start to see a reaction out of it, like the temp gauge or fuel gauge, and it starts swinging up right off of it, disconnect it, because you don't want to burn the thing up. It doesn't need to be full on all the way over here. And chances are not that high that that would happen, but you know, once you get a reaction, if no matter what you do and it doesn't work, it doesn't do anything, it's probably shot. But if you ground your circuit, because remember, the gauges get voltage to this side, and they get voltage to the dash side of the dash. In other words, you got stuff is difficult to explain. I hope I'm doing a good enough job of it. But don't mind the alternator gauge. Don't mind the ammeter. We're not talking about it. We're just talking about temp and gasoline. So when you turn the key on, let's just imagine that one side, I'm talking about say these things each have two terminals at the back of them, which they do. One terminal gets 12 volts to it, supplied with the key. The other side is the ground side of it, the ground leg of it. And so whatever this thing is going to, I know that it's kind of simplified, but say temperature gauge goes to the temperature center. Fuel gauge goes to the fuel level sending unit. Those sending units are the ground side of this. So whatever amount of grounds they supply, that's what makes the gauge move. So when you get power to this thing and then you fully ground the other side of it, it should go zoom all the way real quick. It should do something. So if it even starts to move up and heads up the gauge, it's good. The only case is going to be where it's bad is it does not do anything. If you fully supply it with power, fully ground it, and it doesn't do squat, then it's bad. It's real simple test. And you can do those tests. You don't have to have the instrument cluster out. You can do those. You can take and remove the wire to the temp switch and get you like a little jumper and ground it to the block and turn the key on briefly, and you'll see the temperature gauge go zoom. You know it's good. So same with this. Same with the fuel gauge. Now the fuel gauge was not working. Temperature gauge was working, because it did work. So I'm not worried about the temperature gauge, but we got to set this thing up and see if we can get this fuel gauge to react somehow. And I can't use them, if it's bad, I can't use them one out of the later gauges because they don't work. They're not the same ones. That later gauge this whole cluster could probably be replaced by a later one if you just wanted to. You wouldn't have your flasher switch. Okay guys, I'm rambling, so let me do some actual work now, and I'll get back at you. Alright then, now I know that one of these tends to scare some people, but I find these wiring schematics extremely useful, and to me they're not hard to use. Now, what we're going to be doing is we've got to figure out how to supply this cluster with power, 12 volts to it, and then the ground for the fuel gauge. So, oops, sorry about that, I had my foot caught on or something there. So anyway, what we got going is, if you look on the back of this cluster, this is just like the later one. So if you have a 70, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you got the same sort of arrangement. But you look on the back here, and you got a printed circuit board, and you see those black things are bulbs, and that can that's up there is the rectangle is the voltage regulator for the gauges that lets it, well, you know, I was telling you, I said don't bake the gauges with your 12 volts. Well, if that thing's working, it won't let you anyway, because it regulates down like 5 or 6 volts just to keep it from, I think more than anything it's probably to keep the reaction of the gauges much less dependent on the voltage, because when these cars don't have a very robust electrical system. The alternator is normally about 30 amp alternator, and so and you've had these or any other old car that's old, you know, when you sit at a red light or something and you got the lights on or the wipers on, everything tends to slow down when it idles. So I guess they didn't want the gauges doing a jig whenever you were sitting there at low idle and hardly any alternator output. So they regulate those down to about 5 or 6 volts. So what we got to do is this guy right here is your multi-pin connector, and you got a harness in the car that's going to connect to that, and it's got several wires in there. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. Is that 9? Yep, it's 9. So what we do to find out what's what on this is look at your schematic, and this is actually 2 pages made together, but we're looking right here. So you see you got 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, and it's got color codes for the wires. So if you get too confused, you can go into the car in there and look at the connector on it. But this connector is keyed, which means if you look up there at it, it's got a slot at the top of it up there, so that connector can only go on one way. So if you ever deal with one of those, remember that, please. So what we're looking for is right here. If you look, it says that they're lettered A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and K and L. You don't have the other two. But right over there it says what it is. It says number A is the gauge feed. That's just what I was telling you about, and it's right there. That's the dark blue with a, I don't know what the TR means on that, but there's a dark blue wire. That's the gauge. That means what I was telling you about when you turn the key on, you get 12 volts to power the gauges up. Power the warning lights up also. The only thing that doesn't power up is the illumination lights and the speedometer. So anyway, that's your feed, and then you see where it says B, which is gas gauge. That's another dark blue wire. There it is, B. That means that's the ground circuit to the gas gauge. That's the wire that goes back to the tank cylinder. And same deal right there. It says C, which is temperature indicator, which is the next one beside it, which is a violet wire. That's the one that goes out to the engine. And then you got the others, high beam, instruments, direction, oil pressure, and brake. So it's really, really, really simple. So all I got to do is I have to take my jump pack and carefully find out which terminals are which, and I'm going to hook them up, and then I'm going to power up my jump pack and just briefly and see if I get a reaction out of that gauge. Okay guys, this was not hard to figure out either. It just simply, on the sheet it says it's the third and fourth one over from the ones that are not there or blank, going clockwise. So that's simply just the way it's working here too. You know, 1 2 3, and that is your gauge feed. That one at directly at 12 o'clock, and the one beside it is going to be the ground for the fuel gauge. So what's going to happen is I'm going to take my little alligator clip leads that I was using. It's really high tech, isn't it? And then I'm going to use red as my feed onto there, and then I'm gonna, that's the third one over, and then this is going to be my ground for the gauge. This is temporarily taking the place of the fuel tank cylinder. Just make sure you don't have anything else touching back here once you get this thing repositioned. We don't want it to blow, do we? Just all right, come on. Okay, double check. Looking good there. So I'm just going to simply positive to positive. Try to keep these apart so you don't blow your jumper pack up. Scary stuff in it. So now I'm gonna set you guys up so you can hopefully see the fuel gauge in there, which you can't see, can you? Oh, there my light down. I did. I've killed so many batteries on this. Alright, hold up a sec. Whoa! Can you guys tell that it is the late afternoon and I've been working all day? Oh yeah, you can see it. Okay. No flashlight needed. I'm going to flick this jumper pack on real quick and see if we get something out of that gauge. Woohoo! There it went. You see how quick that was? That's why you don't want to keep your supply on real long. Yeah, it's sinking back down. Now, let me explain something to you why that did that, so that you know what you're doing. Because it's important that you know what you did, not just how to do it. As I said, I'm going to repeat myself again, but that thing I was telling you about back there, that side that says gauge feed, now that was used for many years, and it was used all the way up through 80s, maybe even some 90s, later than that possibly, before everything got so computerized. I know GM used them, Ford used it, but that's a real simple system. And like I said, the cluster is powered up from the ignition switch. That's basically what I did when I flipped this thing on the jump pack. I just basically took the place of the switch. So you got power to one side of the temp gauge, you got power to the one side of the gas gauge, you got power to the brake light, you got power to the oil light if you saw it over here to the right. We're not going to talk about turn signals, we're not talking about the illumination, so, and you don't worry about the flasher. Just anyway, those two things. So that's, and as I said before, I'm going to reiterate this again, what you're doing is you are substituting the ground side of the gauge by doing what you just did. Your electrical circuit has to have a hot side and a negative side to operate. So, and what I did on this again, I found the circuit, the pin out back there that says that is the gas gauge, what they call the gas gauge feed. This is the ground side of it. So all we're doing here, so we understand what we're doing, is we're substituting the ground side of the gauge circuit temporarily, just to see if the gauge is operable. That's how you test any kind of gauge like this. So I know at least one or two of you guys have asked me very recently, how do you test these gauges? You got gauges that don't work. So that's how you do it. And again, you don't have to do this with the cluster out. It's very simple to do it with everything together. You just go out if you want to test to see if the temperature gauge is going to work. Just remember, first of all, remember that the gauge is on these. The gauge goes all the way to the top when it's fully grounded. So what you do is you go out to the engine, you take the connector off the temperature sender, you take one of these little, like I said, one of these little jumper alligator leads that jumps it, 2 clips on it. You clip one to the connector you just took off, and then you connect the other to a good ground on the engine. You go in here and do what I just did. Don't do it very long though. Just turn the key on real quick and look and see if it starts going vroom. If it starts going vroom up, you know the gauge is good. The gauge is not your problem. And the fact is that it actually tells you that nothing's your problem except the center, because you've isolated. That means if everything's working when you do that, that means that everything from here out to the connector that goes right down on the sending unit is good, because if your wiring was bad or you had a problem here, it wouldn't do anything. So in the case that it didn't do anything, you turn it and do what I just told you, and it does nothing, then you got to start coming back this way and see if you got a wiring problem. Those bulkhead connectors cause problems, cut wire, or the gauge is burned up. So same for the gas gauge. It's real simple. You go under there, take the connector off. If it's a truck or whatever, sometimes they have a connector somewhere in line you can just take loose and find the right wire for it. These only have one, and take that thing off the sending unit and ground it. And so when you do that, hit the key real quick, that gauge should do just what this one did. It should do this when you turn the key on. It's all the way up. So if you left that thing on, that thing would, I kind of laugh sometimes when people say it'd peg out there. That's what it'd do, it'd peg out. And you don't, it's not real good for it to do that, so try not to ever do that. So okay, what do we learn from this? This means that our gauge is physically good, it is operable. So our problem is, if we have a problem, is either the sending unit, even though it's a brand new one, is just not going to work and show anything in the tank yet. Maybe there's not enough gas in it. That could be the case. I'm not going to condemn it yet. Or we might have a problem along the way on the circuit coming up to the dashboard somewhere. You know, can't rule that out. So we've got a little bit more troubleshooting to do on the car side of it, but for now we're not going to worry about that because we know this is good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to proceed onward. I'm going to get this jerry rig stuff back put up, and I'm going to disassemble this. I'm going to take the switches out. I'm going to separate this fascia and the clear part from the back, and then clean it up and paint those needles. And I may try to paint this speedometer needle, but that's not a real easy thing to do. I may try my hand at it. If it works out okay, I'll do that, because they're fading and they look kind of ugly. I'm probably going to paint this thing too, so I'm going to make it look good. Now, one thing, I learned a lesson on that dart. Sometimes these speedometers start acting up on you, and back there at the back where the cable goes in, they'll dry out, and that thing was making all kinds of noise and sticking and stuff like that. So I'm going to, before I put all this back together, I'm going to test this speedometer and make sure it works. If it does not work, I'll replace it or fix it. So okay guys, this is a long segment of this video for a fairly simple thing to do, but you know, we're trying to educate everybody and, you know, think this is something you should know. So if you got any questions, feel free to ask, and this will apply that, you know, if you got a dart, or you got a duster, or a scamp, or you got a charger, or you got a Grand Fury, or a truck, or a van, or anything like that that's, you know, older than probably the early 90s, then this procedure will work, because Mopar was too cheap to change much of anything. So hope you enjoyed this, and it's kind of some just sort of technical mumbo jumbo here, but this is how we do it. Thanks for watching. See you guys on the next one. This likely says August the 7th, 1967. So we got a little bit of lenses we should be able to take off in one. Let's see. No, maybe not. I guess not. We might make it so we can take it out, but we'll see. We'll see if we need to take this out. I don't think so. Not easily. That's not there on the later ones. And that thing over here is cardboard. Bits and pieces there. Okay. We'll work a little bit more on disassembling this. That's right. Alright then, I got this thing broken down about as far as I'm going to take it. And this is real simple to get these things out apart. Nothing to it really. You got your basic housing here. You see that's still got the circuit board on the back of it. There's no need in taking that out. And I took the speedometer out first. The speedometer just has 2 bolts that hold it in. Go through the back in here. And you can do that. And then you can take the gauges out. And they are very, very simple to get out. They just have 2 studs that go through them, each of them. They're respective positions. And then on the inside, there's 2 nuts on them. 2 different ones for the ammeter. Make sure you don't get those mixed up. They're more substantial. And then these have little plastic standoffs that go on the inside of the cluster housing. And they're plastic, and these are kind of cracked looking, so be easy with them. But they've got a raised side like this, and then they've got a recessed side like that. The raised side fits into the hole in the back here. 2 on each gauge, doesn't matter where you put them. And then you just got the inside of this thing like that, and these don't come off easily. These are the diffusers for the illumination bulbs, and so they're in there pretty good. I'm not taking them out. You had a couple for your turn signals. You got a couple of these little green diffusers that just pop out. You got a cardboard diffuser up here for the high beam, just comes right out. And then you've got the one for the oil and the brake light. And one thing to remember about that is this thing has got, on these older ones, the newer ones, a lot more tensy than this. These things, this is before they started cost cutting, so they're made much better. This is a plastic assembly. And the way this thing goes back in here correctly is that when you look at the back of this housing, and be careful of this thing, so look on this metal stamped part right here. This thing's got 3 holes. It's got 1 at the bottom, it's got 2 at the top up here. So that keys this, or orients that red diffuser the correct way. So okay then, what are we going to do now with this? Well, a couple things. I'm going to carefully put some paper behind these needles on these gauges, and I'm going to paint them, and that's all. And then on this one, I'm going to get some light blue, kind of Robin's Egg blue paint. I'm going to clean this thing up. It's got some peeling paint, especially under where the ammeter sits. It's probably got kind of hot. And I'm going to mask these things off, and everything else needs to be masked off. And I'm going to clean this, and I'm going to paint the inside of this kind of a blue, light blue color, and that'll help give it more of that 1960s and 70s blue illumination color that everybody likes. So that's what I'm going to do. I don't have that paint on hand right now. I'll have to go get some tomorrow, I guess. But we will do that. And just clean the switches up. We'll get a headlight switch to replace that one. And clean this hazard switch up. and then put it back together. There's not much to these things. I've already done a video on taking all these apart, so this is kind of just a follow-up, I guess, on that. But this is what I'm going to do with it. I'm not going to paint this back here because this thing is fragile. This plastic where the lenses are, that's really, really fragile. And it's going to have some repair, as a matter of fact, because this thing's put together. It's got these kind of, where they took a, look like a heat gun, and they kind of had these little tabs, and they sort of melted them down to hold all this stuff together. And they're kind of coming apart, so I'm going to use maybe some glue or some tape and stuff to kind of keep this together. Plus, I want to paint over my August date code there. And probably on the front of it, probably what I'll do, I'm going to turn this around, but I'm already just going to redo that black and silver. And it's supposed to be chrome, but shit, you have to send one of these things off to have it restored with the spray chrome. I ain't doing that on this one, so we're going to kind of get a close approximation, hopefully. So yeah. Okay, guys. Thanks for watching so far. Here's a shot of two repainted gauges, the needles, and the one that's not. So brand new. And this one, yeah. So this is what I used to do this with. Just a little art brush that I can wash out, and then this stuff here is called Folk Art Neon. It's acrylic paint. You can find this, I think I got this at Walmart in the craft section, somewhere like that. It's just kind of a neon orange color. And top didn't say what color it is, but this one is this one is 2852 orange. So you don't have to put a lot of paint on those, just a light coat, but it dries good and looks just like the original stuff. So nice and easy. Okay, well, this is just a quick glimpse. I'm in the process of trying to rejuvenate this dash cluster. So I have the face of it out here on the bench, the outside bench, and I'm just doing some masking, and I'm gonna throw on a couple coats of my favorite kind of paint here, and it's kind of a semi-gloss. Should match this pretty good already, what's on this. And this thing's in pretty good shape. It's not broken up or anything, but the black's a little bit faded, and the chrome is especially faded off of this. So pretty much anything we do is going to be an improvement to it. Now, it's kind of difficult to duplicate this chrome because this was kind of a spray chrome type of a thing they did back when this was new, and so, you know, we make it look better, but it's not going to be quite accurate. It's not going to quite look like chrome, but it'll look better than what it is. So let's go ahead and get a coat of black on this, shall we? Here's what we're doing now. This is the back part of this dashboard, and it's the part, I think I've showed you this, but it's the part, if you lean it over and look, it's got the circuit board on the back of it, and sockets for the lights. And normally you would find the gauges in here, or across here, and the speedometer here, but those easily can be removed. Just unfasten them with the nuts and the two screws that hold it all together, and they come right out. So that allows us access to this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some paint and paint this. I'm going to mask off of course the parts that don't need to be painted, but got some of this. This is Rust-Oleum, and this is called Gloss Light Turquoise. And what I think, what the effect is, the result I want to have is I want to just kind of accentuate this kind of 1960s and 70s blue kind of effect in here, because it's got these diffusers. These blue things are the three illumination lights. There's one there, and one there. And then right there you have left turn signal, high beam, right turn signal, brake, and oil pressure warning lights. So hopefully that'll just kind of give a little bit more of a blue effect, because these still tend to have a lot of white. The lights just basically look white. So anyway, And we're considering, you know, the thing about it, I'd like to put LEDs in here, and I've got some to go in it if I wanted to do that, but the only thing about it is that these don't dim. And I'm kind of giving some thought to, instead of buying another headlight switch, just doing a workaround on that headlight switch, because that dimmer, that thing, I don't know yet. I haven't decided about that, because, you know, nobody ever dims these lights anyway. They're so hard to see the instruments as it is that really not no need for it. So anyway, that said, let me go ahead and get working on this, and we'll address the light bulb situation a little later on. So I got the coat of black, a couple of coats of black on this one, and I'm going to let it dry overnight, so that's looking good. Of course, like always, this paint went on very well and looks good, no problems. That's John Deere paint. Then we get over here to this crap that I got from the home improvement big box store, this Rust-Oleum junk here. Look at this. What is this? This is supposed to be gloss enamel. What is this? What is this? That looks like some sort of textured junk. It came right out of this bottle. See, it says can. It says gloss protective enamel. It's supposed to look like the cap there. That don't look like gloss to me. That looks like textured. Looks like some sort of craft paint or something. It looks like, you know, something you would give a kid to paint with. This is the sort of stuff that I deal with on a regular basis, trying to go around here and buy parts and supplies to rehabilitate something. I get one thing that works very well, and then I get another thing that isn't worth even paying a cent for. That junk, if that's the way it all is, that's not gloss paint. That's not even close. That's junk. Rust-Oleum should be ashamed of that. They're not, but they should be. Rust-Oleum. That's what Rust-Oleum gives you. That's the effect. So I guess I'll have to use it, otherwise I have to sand all that off again, and I'm not doing that because I already took the back out of this thing, that circuit board, so whatever, we'll have to use it. I may never buy any more of that junk again. I suggest you don't either. Alright guys, so I'm picking back up on this instrument panel rehab that I'm doing on this 68 Valiant, and it's been a few days, about a week or so since I've done anything on this, and just sort of some life got in the way and things going on a little bit. Had to work on days I wasn't supposed to. But anyway, now I'm on vacation and I'm tying back into this, and so I think we're going to get this together. So what happened is I got this all painted to my satisfaction. I'll show you more on that when I get the completed product assembled. But then what happened was I was putting this part here back together. This is the rear housing, I guess you could say. And what happens is you got your three gauges that go across here. You have ammeter, you have fuel level, you have temperature. And this is what the gauges look like when they're out of there. Just got a backing and the two studs coming out. One side's the power supply, the positive side, and then one side's the negative that goes to the sending unit. Well, they use these little standoffs right here that are made out of some sort of plastic, and the ones on this old cluster, this 68 cluster, are white, and they just simply, if you look at them, they've got a raised portion on one side of them, and then the other side is recessed. You simply put the part where the raised portion sits down here like this, you know, two of those, and you put the gauge in, and then use the small sheet metal nut on the back of it to secure it. And then on the back of that also you have the circuit board, like so. See that there? Well, when I took this apart, I kept hearing things rattling around, and what was going on is this thing has got problems with these standoffs. You can see this one's broken, and there's up here, there's a couple, one or two more that went into pieces. So that's the originals, and especially one of them, when I put the ammeter back in, one of those shattered and broke, and so that's not good because you don't want the ammeter shorting out on the back of this thing. That's B positive going right through the instrument cluster, and that ain't good. So we don't want that. So what I decided to do was I got into my parts stash and got one of my spare clusters out. That's a 70 or a 71. It's a later style. But the backing on these is largely the same, even though the instruments don't look quite the same to some degree. They are mounted the same way, and that's good for us because it has these, I guess, made out of a different material. These are black, but they're exactly the same part. And they will work perfectly to put in here and fix this problem. They should hold together better. I guess I figured out quickly that this was not a suitable material to use for this. I don't know what kind of plastic that is, but anyway, I guess you could say 50 years is pretty good, but they're at the end of their lifespan. We just don't want any problems with that. So that's what's going to happen. And I also have to deal with my headlight dimmer, my instrument panel dimmer, which I was showing you portions of that, how I was dealing with that problem. I got to deal with that. So I'll probably deal with that, and when I deal with it, I'll be dealing with it. Now the other thing I'm going to do while I'm in here to this thing, I don't like ever tearing these instrument clusters apart like this, but sometimes you have to because parts are not that readily available. But I'm going to swap out these. I'm going to use these nuts that are on the back of this later ammeter because they're thicker, and they also have these serrated teeth on them to hold things together, keep them from turning. This is the match to them, the other side, the outer nuts. They need a little bit of cleaning up, but we'll do that. And the originals were that was the originals. Came off the 68 cluster, and you can see they're kind of wimpy. So you always want to be on one of these pre-74 or so A bodies, and to a large degree any Mopar of this vintage. You want to be very careful with the ammeter circuit, and you want to be aware of its limitations, because just about all the current that goes inside the car, in fact I guess all of it, passes through this ammeter. So when you have lights on and heater fan on and wipers going and stuff like this ammeter tends to carry a whole lot of load, and most of the time they do okay, but if you start really loading things down, then especially if you got a better alternator installed besides the one that these cars come with, then it starts to stress this thing, and later cars actually bypass this. Well, they didn't bypass the ammeter, but they bypassed the bulkhead connector, so it sort of resolved some problems. But I've seen some of these ammeters that they've gotten so hot that they melted internally, and the needle is no longer there. There's just an ammeter. The needle's down in here someplace. So, as I said, if you have one of these, just be cognizant. Don't use it within its limitations, because you don't want to fire. Like I said, the main problem on these cars is that bulkhead connector that's hiding over on the other side over there, right past the brake cylinder, master cylinder. But those things get old and dirty, and they start building up resistance, and they get hot and they melt, and no good things come of that. So anyway, I'll wrap this up now and continue on with this, and so I'll show you when I get this thing back together all the way. See you then. Hey guys, well anyway, I have completed the minimal repairs and sprucing up of this instrument cluster on the old 68 Plymouth, and not much to this, and just basically took it apart, cleaned it, painted the back housing blue, spruced up the needles on the instruments themselves, and painted this trim. I did the outside with some kind of metallic silver, and it looks close to how it used to look. It's supposed to be, that's actually supposed to be a spray chrome, but my spray chrome machine's broke right now, so I couldn't use that to do this. And I just did this with a paint pen. I went to Lowe's and got a 2-pack of paint markers. I'll show you one right here. This is the one I used. You can probably guess the brand of it. And it came in a pack. like that. So anyway, did that, and I cleaned up the circuit board behind it. I checked all the bulbs. I had one dim bulb over here on the illumination, one good one burned out one over here, and replaced those with 168 bulbs. I put LED replacement 168s in these warning lights for the oil and the brake, so that it make sure and catch my attention. So anyway, that turned out well. It was not a hard repair. Pretty fun. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deal with the radio and the fan face plates, and they're also kind of banged up and beat up. Oh, yeah, there you go. It's doing something.
Yep.
That got it, didn't it?
Yep.